Aloha, everybody. It's me, Mark Fisher, your host with our Scientology stories, Peeling the Onion. And I want to introduce my co-host, Janis Gillham Grady. Hey, Janis, how you doing?
Aloha, Mark. G'day, everyone. Hey, this is another fun interview we're doing today.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. I've known Roger, I think 9 years, and he's become a very good friend. He was a good friend of Paul's and mine, and we did some traveling with Roger over the years, and he came and stayed with us, and he peeled an orange in my brand new car in the back seat when I had to wipe the sticky orange off after I dropped him off at the airport. But I love him anyway, despite that. So anyway, let's bring Roger on.
Okay, here he is, Roger Weller. Hi, Roger.
I'm sorry about that orange, darling. I didn't even remember that. I must have been out of the car when you discovered it. Hello, Mark and Janis.
Hello, it's good to see you again.
Yeah, that's exciting.
I want to let the viewers know that we did another interview with Roger, but these are standalone. So if you don't have to watch the first one to watch this one, you can watch them in any order that you want. But Roger's got a very interesting life, a very interesting story. And, you got involved in Scientology, but you've been on a spiritual journey your whole life. Isn't that right, Roger?
That's correct.
Great. Well, let's get started. I wanted to start up with, you got in Scientology. We were talking about that on the earlier one, but one of the things we didn't get a chance to talk about was Janis's mother, Yvonne Gillham Gents, and stepfather, Heber Gents, and just wanted to find out, any stories you have regarding that and Celebrity Center in the early days in the 70s.
Yes. When Celebrity Center opened, I was already very involved with the AO and ASHO. Celebrity Center didn't deliver these higher levels, so I was involved more. I was mostly at the American St. Hill organization, that all my friends were down at Celebrity Center. So whenever I was in Los Angeles, I would go there. I actually only took one course there, but they had poetry readings, they had music, they had all kinds of fun stuff and a lot of beautiful women. So I enjoyed going there. But
yeah, the women at that time all wore evening gowns, if I remember correctly. At nighttime, they were supposed to wear gowns.
Yes, that's correct. That's right. There was candlelight events.
Yep. Poetry by candlelight.
That's right.
Yep.
So I have two very interesting stories with Yvonne. In 1970, we're jumping up now. I don't know when CC first opened. I first got to Los Angeles in 1968 to do power processing. And I think it might have opened, because in 1970, I was doing all these OT levels at ASHO, but I think Celebrity Center was open right then because I went to events.
69.
Okay, 69. I wasn't in Los Angeles then, so when I came back in 70, it was there. But we jump ahead for about a month. Celebrity Center then was at the big chateau, the manor. I call it the new Celebrity Center. It was new to me. It was at the fancy place. What's it called? I call it.
You're talking about. Well, it was on La Brea first. They had the big building on La Brea, right?
Hang on. It was on 8th Street. And there was a time, right? And then there was a time period where she rented a manor in the hills.
Oh.
And had moved it there, but because the stats had faltered and started going down, Hubbard ordered she moved back to the 8th Street. So she moved
How about in
8th Street.
How about in 1977? Heber and Yvonne were there every day.
In 75, they moved to La Brea. In 77 was when she got removed as the commanding officer of Celebrity Center and was made the commanding officer of the PR org, Public Relations org, and that was located in the manor. Celebrity Center
So that's when I really connected with your mom.
Okay.
I was dating a lady named Annette who lived right across the street at the what? It's a famous
The Edgemont.
Shangri-La.
Shangri-La.
Lodge.
So Annette and I would go over there for dinner for like a month every day. Yvonne invited to sit with her and Heber. It was a real honor for me. Heber's the president of the church, and Yvonne is the Celebrity Center founder, and I didn't even know that she was the PR person then. I was in my own universe, I guess. But every night we had these wonderful dinners together. And we would talk and we would talk. And one day, Yvonne invited us to go to Las Vegas with her and Heber. There was an event over there. So we meet him at the Burbank airport. I get there on time. I get on the plane and they're ready to take off, and there's no Yvonne and Heber. So I said,
typical.
I said, a very important celebrity, you don't have a lot of intention. A very important celebrity is coming any minute. You can't let this plane take off. Because I didn't know where I was going. I would have flown to Las Vegas. What would I do? So I stalled them for 10 minutes and they showed up. So that was
and you know, Roger, she's been known to personally go out on the runway and tell the guy who directs the planes, call back that plane so that she could get on it.
Oh, no kidding. Wow, that's funny.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm proof of it. I saw it with my own eyes. So we go to Las Vegas, and I think of Yvonne as always working hard. I've known Heber since the late 60s at ASHO. He was on the briefing course. He just finished, he was in that movie, Paint Your Wagon. That's one of the backup singers. So Heber's a character. But Yvonne, I never saw her. She's always working. So we're in this hotel. She's got a bathing suit on, Heber, and they're in love, swimming in this pool. It's very emotional even now to look back at it. They had a timeout from the Sea Org. And I don't know how many people captured that. I was there, and it was very special. Then that night, we go to a fancy casino. We have special reserved seating for Shirley MacLaine doing a one-woman show.
Oh, wow.
Her public relations officer was a Sea Org member.
I remember that. I don't remember who that person's name was, but I remember something like that.
Yeah, it was a lady. I can't remember her name. So during the show, before, they bring a bottle of champagne to our table. And that lady, Betty, was there, the Japanese lady from Celebrity Center.
Miyahara.
Yeah, she was there, and maybe another person. So they bring over this fancy goblet with silver and a big bottle of champagne from Shirley MacLaine. Shirley MacLaine probably didn't know anything about it. But it was
except she did believe in past lives. She does believe in past lives.
She believed in a lot of stuff. She's a cool lady. So after the show, this was at a big casino, I get to go back and introduce myself to her. I loved her in the movie with Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon.
Some Like It Hot.
She was Warren Beatty's sister. So she wrote that spiritual book. She hung around that bookstore on Melrose Avenue. So I was honored to meet her. She was all sweaty. She just danced and ran around for an hour and a half like Mick Jagger. So that was a very special weekend with your mom. And then here's another very important event. Another night, I'm having dinner with Heber and Yvonne with Annette, and Heber is all excited. He said, we're going to release next week, what's the name? The Freedom Magazine, that the United States government was going to assassinate the head of Panama, which was probably Noriega at the time.
Right.
So he tells me this. I go spend the night with Annette. I hear all this racket. Early the next morning, after he told me that, the FBI raid was happening.
Interesting, because I had actually been told by, I think it was one of Mom's staff, that the day before the FBI raided, Mom had called the GO and tipped them off that she'd heard there was going to be a raid.
Yeah, you
And
mentioned
no
that.
one,
But
yeah,
Heber,
no one
it-
listened to her.
yeah, and Heber was so excited, and he's telling me that. And the next morning, I saw all these U-Haul trucks, and there were guys with axes, and they had those wheelie things. What are they called?
A
They call them
dolly?
a
Dollies.
dolly.
The
Yeah.
Dalai Lama. They have these dollies full of these stacks of folders, and I don't usually get up at 8:30 in the morning, but I happened to witness this, and it was history. It was this big thing where
Yeah.
Mary Sue
Yeah.
Hubbard went to jail, and I knew Henny Health. I knew Bob Thomas, the original guy. I knew Marty. Drifting. Artie
Greenberg?
Marin.
Oh, Artie Marin. Artie
You remember,
Marin.
I've been out of Scientology for about 40 years, but I have a good memory, and it all momentarily, I had a blank out there, but this was a very interesting night. And the last time I saw Yvonne, then she disappeared. Our month was like a month with Yvonne and Heber. It ended. And Spanky told me that she went to Flag.
Well, she'd first gone to Mexico
Okay.
October 20th on her birthday in 77. She
Okay.
went to Mexico on a tour, and that's where she had a stroke
Okay.
and came back and then ended up at Flag in December.
So what day did she move on?
January 23rd, 22nd, 23rd. I
Okay.
think the 23rd.
So months went by, and I kept thinking about her and Heber, and the connection had disappeared with Heber when Yvonne passed. So I get a call. I'm not usually in LA too often. I would live in Santa Cruz or Palm Springs or somewhere. But I was still there with Annette, and I get a call from Spanky.
This is Spanky Taylor.
Yeah, talking very solemn. And she didn't say that your mom had passed, but she was hinting at it, and I just bursted out. It was sad. She said, I said, did Yvonne die? I was like angry. And she said, yes. And would you like a session? I said, no, fuck you with your session. I was upset. Didn't make sense to me. I didn't even know the story, how they didn't give her medical attention, but it was just a bad feeling. So that was my last experience. And I wasn't that close to Yvonne except for that month. I wasn't
Right.
like the main guy at Celebrity Center. She was always busy, and I told you that story how I took a couple of regs to the Queen Mary with Dick Clark, our last talk. But now I get another call that there's that special event to honor her. And I was sitting next to Robin Williams of the Incredible String Band, and I saw John Travolta come in with Heber at the end. He was more protected. He sits down, and they gave this memorial. And then at the end, this is kind of a silly story. I told you this the other day, Janis. We're all going up to give our condolences to Heber, and Annette always wanted to get married, and I didn't. So
Who's
Heber
Annette?
says,
Who's Annette?
Annette?
Who's
His
Annette?
girlfriend.
Annette
Oh, okay.
Plimiani. Now she runs that learning center in Clearwater. She's still a Scientologist. I haven't spoken to her in 100 years. So we go up to Heber, and Heber says to us, Yvonne was always hoping you guys got married. It was the worst thing. It just, I had a bad night after that. So that was probably the last time I saw Heber. And then I moved out of Los Angeles. Flag got real popular, and that's where I went. I went from Santa Cruz, California to Flag, and I never went to LA anymore.
In Clearwater, Florida. Yeah.
And I would see Karen before she was married to Heber. I would see Karen.
That'd be Karen de la Carriere.
Karen de la Carriere, and I knew everybody there. I probably went there. I would go there. I would open up these leather shops. At the time, it was seasonal. I would make a lot of money in December, and I go to Flag January and February, and I did it probably for 6 years. And though I'm proud of myself, 19 years in Scientology, I only spent $100,000. That's a record. Now you can go in for 1 year, knock it up the bridge, and spend $1 million.
That's right. Hey,
Exactly.
Roger, I was going to tell you something. Somebody commented on your last video that $10,000 that you saved up, you said in cash, that you then paid for your bridge. That would have
It
been
was not the whole 10,000. It was 2,000.
well. Hold on, but it's the 10,000. It would have been $79,000 in today's dollars.
But Mark, I said I had 10,000 saved, but I paid for my solo course through OT8 was $2,700.
Yeah, big difference in prices.
No. All I'm trying to say is that just
Yeah.
for comparison, money back then obviously was worth a lot more.
Okay.
$10,000
Oh,
was
I misunderstood you.
$79,000. Yeah.
And right now, you couldn't even go to Flag and drop 100,000 for the L's or whatever, because you won't even be able to do it unless you donate 100,000 just for the IAS. From what I've heard, I left before all that happened, so
Right.
I'm proud that I spent $5,000 a year in Scientology when you compare to what you get now. And I watched Robin. I told you I watched Robin video last night when you told me, because Robin's my friend.
You're talking about Robin Scott.
Robin Scott called me up a couple years ago. I didn't know about him. I knew that he dressed up as a SEER member, that whole story, but he called me out of the blue. He texted me and said, I see that you go to the Bahamas every year to hear Krishna Das chanting. I said, would you mind if I'm your roommate? I said, I don't mind. He says, well, a lot of people don't like me. Is that a problem for you? I said, if you're nice to me, I don't care. And he turned out to be fabulous.
Uh-huh.
And he helped Janis and I in our group. He went over to Greece and helped us locate our trip for us. And I heard a lot of his story personally as my roommate about the marijuana book, his background in education, how he got into SEER, and his wins. And I was a little more resistant to the wins in Scientology, but he made more of a believer out of me, spending time with him a couple of weeks, and I leaned a little bit in his direction. So if we want to start there, I say Scientology, the good, bad, and the ugly. And when I was in, it wasn't so ugly. It was, I mentioned to you a minute ago, it was before, in the spring of 1967, when I walked into the New York org, there weren't a lot of Buddhists in the world in America. There weren't all these yoga ashrams open up. Est wasn't here. You know, the guy that started Est was a Scientologist.
Yeah,
Werner
Erhard, and the guy that, a lot of groups that had started up Eckankar, that guy Paul Twitchell was a Scientologist. There was like a dozen of these new age things that opened after Scientology. So it was people say, why did you ever get in that? It was like this cool thing. It was this very cool thing. And you hear the story, this guy took the Eastern meditation principles of Eastern religion, and a quantum physicist, made this into this bridge to total freedom that you could go pretty quickly. And I was 17 years old. I read a couple of books I read Siddhartha Damien, and I had read the autobiography of yoga and a book by Alan Watts or Aldous Huxley. I had a very small vocabulary on philosophy, and I was brought up a Catholic. So I was intrigued by it. And I just had fun with it. Every year I would go to either to the AO or to Flag, and it was always a party. It didn't cost me a lot of money. I would go to the wildest parties in the Hollywood Hills, and it was all Scientologists. And there was no out 2D problems. You couldn't have sex. I met a girl from Switzerland who was in staff. We had sex on the beach. And it wasn't even...
Is that a drink?
That was a drink in my mind. It was just... And there was no problem. Annette would send me to ethics, who was that great chaplain, that character, Bob somebody? He was on the ship, Bob Harvey, or
Oh, Bob Harvey. He was from Las Vegas.
he was my ethics officer, and that brings me to ethics for being out 2D. And I said, what out 2D? I told you I just got through a divorce and I don't want to be in a one-person relationship. So, and he sided with me. Now, it would be a different, I just had a horseshoe up my butt with the experiences I had. If I wasn't getting enough sessions, they had this leapfrog thing. You go all the way down there, and I was on, and on knots, the sessions lasted 1 or 2 minutes, and I was never getting in session. So Fred Hauk was the DFP, who you know. I said,
Yeah.
Fred, this isn't working for me. So he put me in every other person. Now it worked. They asked me to wake up at 8 in the morning, and the session might be 9. I said, I don't want to wake if I'm not ready. So they had a tech page come and do an LRH assist by putting his hand on my foot right before a session. Just crazy stuff. I was playing pool with Diana Harper's husband, John Horowitz. They had a private pool table up on the 9th floor of the hotel. So I was treated like a celebrity, and nobody read me hard. David Light, who is this notorious reg before these other regs, at the time I was in, he was the #1 reg, and he would call me Cookie, and he would never hit me for these big dollars. I'm friends with his wife now. She lives in Sarasota. Judy Light, who was a reg too, and she said, David must have liked you. So I was very lucky how I skated through that. But when I was in the hotel, I found out later that somebody jumped out and committed suicide, and the guardian's office would go around and collect all the newspapers in the things and buy them or take them. So nobody knew what was going on. There were staff members that I would see during the day, and Nancy Maney was one of them, where they would sleep out in the parking lot on mattresses when it's very hot and humid in Florida. So we didn't know this.
That was a rehabilitation project for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, the RPF. And as a public person, you wouldn't have known it.
I didn't see that directly, but I always sensed, and I said to you a second ago before we were online, I said when I first joined, it was the Church of Scientology. And well, no, I don't know if it was even a church. It was an applied philosophy. Nobody had uniforms on. It was just fun. But when I went out to Los Angeles in 1970, they looked like Salvation Army outfits everybody was wearing, more than a Navy outfit, but it was very strict.
Roger, let me just interject for our viewers, okay? Roger's talking from the point of view of a public Scientologist, somebody who is paying for their services. He's not talking, he was never a staff member. He was never a Sea Organization member. So he wasn't aware, as all the public were not aware, of the abuses that were going on with the staff in the Sea Organization or the Rehabilitation Project Force. The only way they would hear about it is every once, in passing. But the public were kept in session, on course, treated like celebrities, treated like first-class citizens. So the viewpoint he's stating is how it was for a public person. It was not they knew everything, and why would he say that this is all really good for him and it was fun in those days? Because it was fun for him in those days, right, Roger?
That's correct. And Malin Gelfand is still alive. I think she's in her 90s. I heard she still CS's. She was my Knots auditor, and she mentioned to me once she was eating rice and beans, and I'm paying $400 an hour for this consultation. Why is this person that I'm working with eating rice and beans? So her and her husband, I would take them out to dinner, and she didn't do that to I take her out to dinner. It just came up in a comment. She became a personal friend of mine. So I was shocked by that.
Right.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Roger. Obviously, you were in Scientology for a while as a public, and you went up the Scientology bridge or whatever. But obviously, at some point, you got moved away from Scientology, and what was that all about?
People always ask me, why did I leave? And I always make a joke of, why did I ever get in? And they would laugh. If you meet people that know, if I tell them I was a Scientologist, at a party or something, I have all the attention. Everybody is so curious about it.
Mm-hmm.
This cult of Tom Cruise is it's just bizarre. So I was not happy with it for a while. It didn't fulfill my spiritual goals. And I just kind of got lazy and a little addicted to it. Every year, I would take a large amount of my savings and give it to down in Clearwater for years. I mentioned 7 or 8 years in a row, and I go, what? And I'm down there. I'm the last person getting an auditing session. Pierre was the auditor of the year because he audited so much. At 10 o'clock at night,
Pierre
Pierre
Etier.
Etier, he audited me in the church and out of the church. So he audits me, and we finish the session, and I walk into I was told to go to this meeting, and it was announced that Ron went to the next level. We had a video of it. I guess it was in Los Angeles. I called my friend Neil Brown.
Are you talking about when he died?
The night he died, I was being
Okay.
audited. Not the night he died, the night they announced he died.
Right.
Okay.
And I called up Neil Brown, who I mentioned the other day that he knew Ron in the 50s, and he didn't believe it. He said, that's suppressive saying that. I said, okay, Scientology is suppressive. I agree with you. So it's funny. So I go back. I was doing the false purpose rundown. I go back to Los Angeles. There's 2 reasons why I left. One is too long of a story, but when I go back to Los Angeles, this was before regging started, where they're asking for hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
This guy was involved with on a business deal. We went into this room with Darcy Collingsworth.
Simpson. Oh, okay.
Darcy
Hollingsworth, yeah.
He was these kids. I looked at him as kids. This was probably the David Miscavige, the Marty. I looked at him as kids, but he was the only one I remembered because I knew him. And he's asking Ben Kugler to give him $1 million. And they're reading from History of Man. We're in a locked room. Reading from History of Man, which is a crazy book about how Scientology and the earth is going to be destroyed if we don't bail them out. So he wrote a check that night for $500,000. This was a lot of money in 1985 or 86.
Yeah.
And they wanted $200,000 from me. It was just too upsetting to me. And they're giving me a hard time.
Did you pay it?
No, I didn't have $200,000 to give. They ended up settling for an IAS membership, which I already had one from years ago that I paid $15. Now it was $1,500. So I bought it. I went back and talked to my wife at the time, who was still going home. We just had a baby. I said, this is not the organization that I signed up for. It doesn't feel right to me anymore. And I just did this. You do this auditing, and you feel good, and you go home, and you still have life's problems, but you're $100,000 less money in the bank.
Right, exactly.
Right.
That's the honesty of it. But with what Robin said the other day, I love the power process and these grades. I was a very shy person. I do this thing on communication, like in an hour and a half of auditing, I'm out talking to people. So there was some value to it. Was it worth hundreds of thousands of dollars? For me, probably not. Maybe I would have developed it on my own anyways. But when I did the power processing, it was a very deep spiritual experience, and one of the greatest things that ever happened to me.
Right.
So here we are. I decide I don't want to be here anymore. And the same week, there was a big article in the LA Free Press about Scientology. So I read this and I show it to my wife, and she doesn't want to hear this. And then I met Hannah, and I met that famous guy called the Ziegler tapes.
John Ziegler?
Okay. John Ziegler.
That
was Mark Yeager's stepfather.
Yes.
Yeah, Mark Yeager.
He was doing this whole thing about Scientology. So he introduced me to it. And I was shocked by it, but it made sense to me. He told me about the CMO. I never heard of it. Here I'm in Scientology for 19 years. I never heard of David Miscavige. I never heard of Marty. I never heard of Mike Rinder. And I never heard of the CMO, Commodore's Messenger. It was all Chinese to me. And I was
Right.
in the know. I knew what was going on. When you said I wasn't staff, Mark, for 6 months, I was the Class 8 supervisor in Los Angeles, which was the highest training at the time for an auditor. And I also supervised the FEBC course, which was the highest admin training. So I had a little experience how odd it was to be a staff member. But I got paid $50 a week, and I could leave when I wanted to. It wasn't like I had to work all night like Sea Org members did and not sleep and all
Right.
that. So
Right.
I decided to leave, and they immediately, who was that famous CS? I mentioned his name to you last night, Mark.
Pierre?
What? You mean David Mayo?
No, after David. I knew David. He
Ray
died of
Medoff?
Ray
cancer
Medoff?
after that. He was the
Oh,
main,
Norman Stark? No.
no,
I don't know
Jeff
who you're
Walker?
talking about.
he was a Rhodes Scholar, and he died of cancer a few years ago when he was a senior CS. You knew it.
Oh,
It doesn't matter. Well, anyways, they contact me and said the reason that I want to leave is I missed something on my false purpose rundown. They want to give me free auditing. Richard
Reese?
yeah, Reese.
Reese, that's it. He was a big shot. He
Yeah.
comes out and they rent a hotel room on Highland, not far from Celebrity Center. I think they were auditing a few people. That guy Fred Hauk was the DFP, and he's giving me sessions every day. And Sandy Woolhair, who was a dear friend of mine, was the CS at AO at the time. She was CSing it. So he's auditing me, and I come home, and I'm all enthusiastic, and my wife at the time is wondering why I'm still leaving if I'm feeling so good. So this went on for 3 or 4 days, and finally, Richard Reese says, the CS says, cut the bullshit. What's going on here? And behind him was the bridge to total freedom. They taped it on the wall, that bridge thing. And I could have said anything, but I looked at that and I said, I'm leaving because of that chart. I've been in it for 19 years, and all these abilities gained and these OT levels didn't exist. It was a dream. And I did the OT levels in 1970, the original ones, and I almost cried when I read OT3. I was so disappointed after doing power processing. This was all nonsense to me, just like what
Right.
Robin Scott said.
Robin Scott said. And I don't want to invalidate. I've had other friends that are dear people that got a lot out of it. But for me, it didn't work for me, and I was so disillusioned by it. And then when I left Scientology, after this whole deal, they even wrote me a check for $11,000 to make
Did
me
you
happy.
ask for a refund?
I asked for money that was on account.
Okay.
And if they said that this false purpose rundown didn't really work for me, it was something out, I said I'd like money back for that too. And I had a list of every staff, every public at Flag. They wanted to FSM for them. So I currently had this hot list that Hannah and some of these John Ziegler types want, and I met Merrill Mayo. They all wanted that list. And I was kind of broke right now. I just had something happen. So I traded the list basically for the money. But it was all done per tech that it was within 30 days of asking for a refund. So I wasn't even declared right away, from what I was told later.
Well, probably because you got a repayment instead of a refund.
Yes, it was a repayment
Yeah.
for the 30 days of the
Right.
auditing that I had. But anyways,
okay.
but I left, and at the time, the LA Times article was, this big article was coming out, and I had just
Right.
left, and I knew everybody. So I didn't want to be in it because of my daughter. I just did not want to stir it up, and I was really confused. And then I read that book, Madman It just came out, Madman or Messiah. I read it back in upstate New York.
That was Ben Gordon's book, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that changed. That
Yeah.
was that
Yes.
was big. And when I was out there, show a picture of Chick Corea now, if you would. Are we ready
Okay.
for that?
No, yeah, I'm ready. I'll put him up here. You know.
To stay with this look. Now that jacket that I'm wearing, Chick Corea bought 128 of those from me for his world tour in 1977. I just happened to find that picture in that car I bought in England, a little Morgan. It was all in a collage, so I couldn't erase that. But I used to go to Chick's house as a celebrity myself every Valentine's Day. There were very famous, Al Jarreau was there, Janis, Ian. It's where I met Peter and Karen Sless. They were new into Scientology. They were trying to get them more. We became friends at one of those events. But I felt very privileged. Chick would have, one time he had the LA Symphony Quartet playing with him, and Roger Williams once, the famous piano player, pulled his pants down to show Gail that he had heart underwear on. So it was always a lot of fun. So I got to do a lot of these things like that.
Yeah.
So that's one example. And I made money off it. I sold 128 of those for like $100 a piece. So it was a good deal.
Yeah.
So it was a magical time. And Chick Corea was a diehard Scientologist. When I left, he called me. Michael Roberts called me, that actor, acting like we're the best of friends. Michael Roberts says, Roger, I won't be able to hang around with you anymore. And I said, honestly, Michael, I don't think we hang around that much. Anyways. So, and the same with Chick. But it was, and I was friends with his wife, Gail. So I just decided my spiritual path was more important to me than this thing that I was doing. And going,
right.
It was very old to me. I'm embarrassed that I stayed in 19 years. And the crazy thing is, as soon as I left, Hannah hooked me up with a class 12 auditor that audited me on the ship.
Hannah Eltringham.
Yeah, Hannah introduced me to a dear friend of mine. She's very private. You know her. I'm not going to say her name, but the first thing I did was I went to Delaware and got L11 and L12. I didn't care for L10. I didn't like it. We started, I said, this isn't for me. But it was here I am leaving this organization that I never really could justify spending $100,000 doing these L's. So it cost me a few $1,000s, and I think it was worth it. I enjoyed it. So here I am leaving this group, and I was still addicted. That's the first thing I ran to. As soon as I could, I got more auditing. But I was done with it, and I wasn't a computer guy. And many years went by. I was living in Massachusetts and upstate New York. I had a couple shops, and I got on the internet, and people started reaching out to me, people that I thought were still in. I had hundreds of friends that were out. I thought I was the only evil person that left.
Yeah.
So it was really fun. And it took me more time. And right around when I met Janis is when I really came out, 10 or 11 years ago. And I became friends with Larry Wright. I went down to Texas to the grand opening of the movie, Going Clear in the Prison of Belief. I went to a couple ex-Scientology events. I met Mike, I met Marty, and it was interesting. And I got to learn about a lot of the crazy stuff happened when I left, and I saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah. Now you knew Paul back then, didn't you, when you were at Flag in Clearwater?
Yes, I was on the very first Purification Rundown. That's kind of famous. And Karen Black, the actress Darby Simpson ran Celebrity Center New York.
Yep. Lon Tenney.
Lon Tenney had something to do with Star Wars.
Yep.
Lloyd Latch.
Yeah, it's just so the public know, the Purification Rundown is where you sit in a sauna for 5 hours a day, and you run, sit in the sauna, and sweat out whatever impurities and stuff's in your body.
And because I had done LSD, I wanted to go there and do knots, and they put me right out. They said, you have to do this. I was a little upset about it. Then I went through it, and that's where I met Paul, and Greg Woolhair, who became a big shot, was the guy there, and he was a friend of mine. And after 11 days, they said, what's your cognition? I said, I realized it's hot in here. I was done with it. I was done.
Yeah,
well, Paul, it was healthy for me. taking all these niacin pills and stuff, and it was really
Yeah,
cheap,
and
rancid
vitamin.
oil.
Yeah.
It was rough on my stomach, but
Yeah.
I did it,
Yeah.
and then now I'm ready to do this very special thing, the Knots rundown. They said, no, you can't do this. This new thing came up, and they told me Ron was CSing our folders on the Purifin. Paul said it was true. So now I have to do, I'm the very first person in the world to finish the Knots drug rundown, which became OT4. And
Right.
after it took me 11 hours. It was not a big deal, but I did get something out of it. And I was asked, the staff didn't even know much about it, who were selling it. They didn't know about it. They said, one of your musters where you, before dinner or after dinner, the whole staff was at the grand ballroom or somewhere. And they asked me to explain my wins on this thing. So it was kind of a special moment for me too. And I did. And I got a standing ovation from the staff. So, and with all the good, bad, and the ugly of it, I'm thinking about the interesting people that I met that I would never meet otherwise. Caring, wonderful people. Even the people that were schmucks were good people. They just got so wrapped up in the stress of saving the planet or whatever when they were on staff. But everybody went in there in the beginning to help mankind. I truly believe that, like they're in the Peace Corps or a social worker.
Right.
So I always honored the staff. At the end of my trip down there were a lot of scams down at Flag. People were hanging around with trying to get money out of people, not the staff members,
Right.
public. I have this, you're going to double your money by Tuesday. And there was all this illegal stuff going on. And it was like spiritual materials. It had nothing to do with the original purpose, is what I felt. And I honored the staff more than I did the public.
Right. Well, Roger, after this briefing, I can tell you how to double your money. Just stay on the line.
Okay. My money's already been doubled.
You just give it to us.
Now, one interesting person I met in Scientology, go to Ingo Swann.
I'm going to. I've been waiting to ask you about him. Hold on. There he is. Who is Ingo Swann for our viewers? Somebody needs to say who he is. I don't know. I didn't really even know who he was. Go ahead.
He is world famous. I didn't know how famous he was. And I was also good friends with Pat Flanagan. He just died with a friend of mine down in Ecuador. Pat Flanagan, he came up with this whole pyramid power. But Ingo and Hal Puthoff, who's still alive, worked at Stanford University, and he was also a Scientologist. And the CIA, remote viewing was popular. The CIA thought they would like to find out if Russian, what are they doing on the moon or whatever. And Ingo Swann passed the test for remote viewing, and it was done at Stanford. And
what is it? What is remote viewing for our viewers? I'm not even sure what it is.
I can go to the moon and have full perception and see who's up there.
In other words, you could basically see anywhere in the world what's going on without physically being there.
I can see you have red socks on right now.
Yeah, my mother used to talk about Ingo and Pat Bryce.
Yeah, Pat Bryce was another one. That's right.
Yeah. So she used to tell me how these guys were hired by the government and that they could tell you what was in certain locations, where the atomic bombs were, where this was, where that was.
Yes. And it turns out it wasn't that accurate after talking to Hal Puthoff.
Oh, okay.
But I'm out in Michigan where I first met Marty Rathburn. And it was right at the time that the breakup with Tom Cruise, so all this press was there. But on this side, he's talking about Ingo Swann. And I mentioned that I knew Ingo Swann. And he was flabbergasted. I said, matter of fact, I'm going to be in New York next week. I haven't seen him in years. I'll go see him. So I did. The funny thing is, he lived right across the street from the Village Voice. Tony would have died to know that Ingo was right there. I couldn't. He was not doing well, Ingo. He was not very healthy. He owned a 4-story and his own elevator. He owned all 4 stories, and he lived in there cluttered. And he had about 40 books that he wrote, all these subjects, spiritual research. I didn't know he disappeared from my world when he left Scientology. I met him from another well-known person. I was a roommate with, why am I not remembering? She was with Ron. She was with Ron when Ron was only her on the ship, on the little ship when he was doing OT3.
Oh, Virginia Downsbury.
Virginia Downsboro is a dear friend of mine. She was my roommate for a year. She lived in Dick Powell's house, the actor, up in the Hollywood Hills when that was real Hollywood. So Ingo would come by and talk to Virginia. Virginia was like 120 when I met her. I think she lived to be 200. She never aged. She just kept getting older. So I meet Ingo, and he liked me. We talked about some of this stuff. So when Marty said that to me, I found his phone number. He was in rough shape. He didn't want to see me, but I talked him into it. I said, let me take you out to lunch. He says, I don't eat. I got him to let me bring him some orange juice and a donut or a bagel. So I go in his house. Now show the next picture.
Which one?
The painting.
The painting.
Oh, okay. Oh, I got it right here. Sorry.
Yeah.
He wouldn't let me take a picture of him. He had no teeth. He had a bad accident years ago. He was kind of a heavy drinker, and he died a few months after I saw him. But he told me this is a painting he did of a person that goes into human bodies. And this was a guy he met at that famous market in Los Angeles, Ralph's. He met this alien in Ralph's, and this is his painting of it. So I got a kick out of it. I took a picture of it, and anyways, he's known by people. Our viewers are going to know who he was if you're into that. Like the whole Monroe Institute loved. That's a famous thing that Robert Rameau started. They love Ingo Swann because I had been there.
Right.
So it was an interesting story. Then I said, Ingo, I really want to know. You're not going to be with us much longer. Do you know you're out of your body? You're going to the moon. Do you know what's going to happen after you die? This is a guy that's world renowned as a psychic, and he was OT. I'm going to say an F word. Here's what he said to me. Fuck it. Nobody knows what's going to happen when you die. I said, and I agreed with him.
Yeah.
I said, thank you for being honest, Ingo. And then he told me, and he would almost cry talking about your mother. And the day he said to me, I wanted to marry Yvonne. He proposed to her. This was before she was married, I hope. No.
Yes.
And she said, I will only marry you if you join the Sea Org. So that was another Yvonne story.
Yeah.
And he got real emotional about the memories back in the 70s. This was when I saw him. This was like 3 or 4 years ago or 6 years ago. He's late in his life. He's on his deathbed, basically. So that was a beautiful story. So that was like an example.
Is that him too?
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah.
That's him too. So he was
Happy
kind of
audiences-
into aliens. He was into aliens and sort of telekinesis and all sorts of
Yes, stuff.
mental things, right?
If anybody's interested, Google him. He was a very interesting guy. I used to show the football with John Brody, the San Francisco Giants football player at Flag, when he was down there at Flag. Oh, he was like the football player of the year that year. And supposedly Phil Spickler audited him. He had a very bad injury. He got audited. Phil only charged him $100. He ran out some incident about his arm. They didn't think he was ever going to play again. And the next year,
he was the most valuable player.
He was the player of the year the next year. And Phil told me that story personally, so it wasn't a PR stunt. So that was a miracle. And
my mom had told me. Yeah, my mom had told me that same story.
Yeah, John Brody was the Scientologist for a long time, and he left the same time that Phil Spickler and everybody left Scientology.
They did,
in the early 80s.
I knew Bill Church was a friend of theirs too. Bill owned
Church's Fried Chicken.
Became famous selling chicken to African Americans where they had nowhere to go. So
Yeah.
they were all millionaires. And Michael Murphy, who started Exxon that I used to go to, he used to get auditing. The Grateful Dead got auditing. I've known the Grateful Dead. So it crossed over everywhere back in the 60s and early 70s.
How about this one? How about this one, Roger?
James, that's a story. Not many. This is in front of my store in Lenox, Massachusetts. My buddy James here. James had a heroin problem, and right down the street from my store and Janis and I and Paul had a drink on that deck. Remember that? The oldest inn in America,
right.
the Stockbridge Inn.
Yeah.
Pimm's Cup I had. But across the street was Riggs Mental Hospital, and when James got signed to the Beatles album Apple, my buddy was his roommate at the Riggs Mental Hospital. So he had issues his whole life. So later on, when he becomes wealthy, he marries Carly Simon. He's on heroin, struggling. I'm not bad-mouthing. This is something he talks about.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Carly was getting auditing at Celebrity Center.
Carly Simon.
Carly Simon, right there in Upper East Side. And while she was getting auditing, James would be in the waiting room nodding out. So that's another inside story.
Yeah, and I remember that John Travolta is the one who got Carly Simon in for auditing in Celebrity Center in New York. I remember that he was the connection that got them in, and then, like you said,
I didn't
James
know
Taylor
that, but I knew Joan Prather, who got John in.
Right.
She was married to Jeff Levin's brother. I
Robbie.
remember that flag. But here's a John Travolta story. I didn't know who John Travolta was. I'm up in Santa Cruz. And I come down to LA, and my friend Neil Brown again, we go into the Melting Pot restaurant to have a bite to eat. We were doing something, and there's John Travolta with the biggest hamburger I ever saw in his mouth. He just sang that Beach Boys song or something, and Welcome Back, Kotter, and it took him to the next level.
Right.
Yeah.
So he sees Neil, and it was like Neil was his best friend. He gave him a big hug. And we had lunch with John Travolta. He had the biggest smile. I don't remember what he even said. He just smiled. He smiled the whole lunch. So that was my first introduction to John. But that was
okay. Now, Roger, I want to ask you about that. Who's this here? Let's talk about your foray into China. Who's this?
Here I am with my wife Danielle. When I left Scientology, I owned a home in upstate New York. I was kind of in turmoil. I think, did you see the house, Janet? Did we drive by it? When we
I don't think so.
Okay, but it was out where we were, where you stayed in the bed and breakfast.
Oh, yeah, we did go to that house. Yeah. Yes.
So I was living in that house, and I was lost. And a chiropractor told me he did acupuncture. I had acupuncture in the 70s by a cool guy out in Palo Alto. So he sticks needles in my stomach, and I have an out-of-body experience. It was pretty wild. So I said, could I get a group of people together and we go over this at night? So he did it. So I did that for a couple of months, and I decided I wanted to be an acupuncturist. So I go back to Los Angeles, which I'm kind of hiding from Scientology. Why would I go back to LA? Because I had a daughter there, and I could have went to school in Santa Cruz. So I went to Emperor's College of Traditional Acupuncture Medicine. It was the #1 college in the United States at the time, in Santa Monica on Wilshire Boulevard. And I was struggling through that. And I meet Danielle, and we end up getting married. And then I started doing a tutorial program with a very famous doctor who was helping AIDS patients. This was in the 1986, 87, when AIDS was this big epidemic.
Right.
And I'm treating 20 AIDS patients every day. It was intense. And I said, Dr. Wang, he was famous in China. He escaped, but he's famous. So I said, a lot of the advanced students would like to go to China. Could you set up a program? So he did, and I was the leader of it. And we went over there for a few months, and it was an incredible journey, some of the things I saw.
Is that this right here?
Yeah, I look like a baker there, but...
It does look like a baker.
And we have the picture you have the picture of me giving a little lecture. Here I am.
Yeah.
That's the first day we got there, and some of the people I brought over and some of the staff of Dalian Medical School, and it says, "Welcome from Emperor's College," and I thank them for inviting us. So there's my little spiel there. My hair was longer, but I had it combed back, so I looked more clean cut. But it was a remarkable thing, and I told you guys, when I did OT3, you know, everybody seems to know what it is now, but there was this Ma Wang tomb from 2,000 years ago, and in the 1970s, they found it, and there was a manuscript in there, and there were ghost points on your fingers that exorcise beings that are stuck in your body. So he was 2,000 years before L. Ron Hubbard, Ma Wang.
Oh, interesting.
I thought it was interesting. But it was a
Yeah.
great journey, and I came back, and I really realized I'd already owned a lot of leather stores, and I realized this was too much work. And I don't have the personality of being in a little room and studying all this Western medicine. If I was treating heart surgeons from UCLA and they're on all these drugs, I have to read these books. What are the side effects of these drugs? It was not just Chinese medicine. So I didn't do it anymore. I said, this isn't for me. That's when I went back to Massachusetts and started my next little empire with these leather stores.
Got it. All right. Now, what about this picture here? What is this from?
The most famous, I'm going to show you something.
Roger has left the building.
Not the building. He has left the chair.
Ram Dass, you know, Ram Dass was a friend of mine, but the most famous saint of the last 100 years was this man, Ramana Maharshi.
You got to move the picture more to
Move
your
it.
right.
Yeah, there
Yes.
you go. Ramana Maharshi is the most famous sage in the last 100 years. He made popular non-duality again, where if somebody asked him a question, he would say, "Who's asking that question?" And when you go and you realize there is no I, it kind of all disappears in meditation. So I went to India. I had an opportunity because as I said the other day, I was on my way to India when I get into Scientology. That's the most sacred mountain in India called Arunachala. That's where the Vedic hymns were written. It's in southern India, way before the Himalayas got popular. And Ramana went there as a young boy and stayed there his whole life. They say Shiva, the god Shiva, the destroyer, is that mountain. So people go from all over the world and meditate and walk around. And I spent a month there, and I spent a lot of time. Ramana lived in a cave for his whole life, and then they built him a little ashram. But he never wrote any books. He never went on a world tour and bought Rolls Royces. He was a very enlightened being. And I feel honored that I got to go to India and have that experience.
Okay. So
Next.
let's go on to the next one here. What's your spiritual experience here, Roger?
I got enlightened that day, but I heard the Big Bang. I always
$4 a bullet.
I always meet characters. I don't know why I gave you this picture. I was a little chunky in that picture. My wife May was from Thailand. I met her up in the mountains here, and we're coming out of a movie theater. And here's this guy an American speaking fluent Thai.
This is her right here.
There's May.
This is your third wife? Is this your third wife?
That was my last wife.
Okay. I just didn't know how many. Anyway, that's fine.
Four.
Okay.
So May was a saint. So this guy is speaking fluent Thai. So we become friends. We go up to his house. He has over 50 machine guns, silencers. He worked for the CIA. He used to do hits on people for the Thai government that were drug dealers. He'd pull up on a motorcycle and take you out with a silencer. This guy was the real deal. So he taught me how to shoot. So this was on 4th of July. He has permits for these guns. So these are $4 bullets. That's
a 50 caliber. That's a 50 caliber machine gun. And where are you? Are you in Thailand or where are you?
No, this is up in the mountains of West Jefferson, North Carolina. He had a big house up there.
Oh, in North Carolina. Okay, well, there you go. There's a 50 caliber
we
machine
had
gun.
permission. While people are lighting off fireworks, I'm shooting a 50 caliber machine gun. So I just thought it was so interesting. So I gave you the picture because how often do I shoot a 50 cal?
And it sounds
Once.
like it's scary. I've sat
Oh, it's scary.
I've sat nearby when I was in Vietnam while people were shooting them, and they're so scary. I don't know how anybody, if it was being shot at you, that you would, it would definitely be very scary.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right, we're going to go through some other pictures here. We got this is random stuff here.
I forgot to talk about Jim the other day. Jim Dincalci.
Well, tell everybody who he is.
Yeah, he was L. Ron Hubbard's medical officer. And when you see that picture of Ron with the long hair, Jim took that in Queens, New York when they were hiding out in 1973, I believe it was.
Jim Dincalci.
He was a beautiful man, and he passed of cancer, but when he first got cancer, where he wanted to get treated was in Sarasota. And I said, Jim, I have a house here. This was up at my house in North Carolina in the mountains. So I said, please come stay with me. So whenever he got his treatments, he would come to my house. We ended up going to Croatia together. He wrote a wonderful book on forgiveness, and he was lecturing there, and he was walking with a cane, struggling. So I went over and supported him. And it was a wonderful, we had a 2 or 3 week vacation all over Dubrovnik and Zagreb, and it was a wonderful time.
Janis, you knew him, right? Can you talk about him a little bit?
Jim knew him.
Yeah, I knew him. I knew him very well. He was the medical officer on the ship, so everybody on the ship knew Jim Dincalci, but we all just called him Jim Din. And very, very mellow, soft-spoken man. I'd never seen him raise his voice once. He was just, everything was calm about him. And he was the medical officer on the ship. He was the medical officer for Hubbard. He used to write daily reports to Hubbard because Hubbard wanted daily reports from the medical officer on any medical situations on the ship. So Jim used to write those, and then he would go up and give Hubbard back rubs and massages and give him, whatever he needed. And he also did a lot of research. He did research for the purification rundown or the sweat out program at the time, and various different things. Or if Hubbard found out someone was sick, he had Jim Din research it. Yes, Roger.
Jim told me once Ron was upset about drugs, LSD and pot. He said, Jim, if you wanted to clean somebody, what would you do? So Jim said I would give him some niacin, I would give him a sauna, and right after that, there wasn't a lot of research done, I don't think, from what Jim shared with me, but then this pure thing came out, but it all made sense to a lot of people, just sweating.
Right. Yeah, well, it started off with Jim recommending that, and then it was like, get the sweatsuits, and the guys had to wear sweatsuits and run, and then slowly over time, that it was being done on a couple of guys who had done LSD that were at the base in La Quinta, and then it gradually turned from the sweat out program to the purification program.
Right.
And Janis, Jim had a big temper. When he left this is a great story. When he left the Sea Org, they locked him in a room where somewhere out in the base there was hammers and stuff, and a lot of like a shop. Jim smashed every window with the hammer.
Wow.
He went nuts. He had a real anger. He had a real anger thing he shared with me, but he was mostly that other guy, but that got him out quick.
Yeah. They wouldn't want someone like that.
What was Jim Dincalci? Janis, I know you've seen him before he passed away, obviously, over the years since we left the Sea Org. What was Jim Dincalci? Because he spent a lot of time with Hubbard. What was his opinion of Hubbard after all those years?
He told me a lot of stories. There was one year, it was Christmas or his birthday or something. And in a little gathering with people like Charlie Rush was dating the gal what's her name, that was always close to Ron.
Annie Broker.
Yes. So anyway,
Annie Rush, Annie Tibman.
And they all give Ron presents. And Jim would massage him every night, just about every night. Ron
Yeah.
would say he'd want to run out the day. He wanted to audit out the day, so we'd give him a touch assist more than a massage. And Ron was very upset that people would give him these presents. He says, "I don't like it." He would get angry over the littlest things. There were lots of stories like that.
Well, Hubbard got angry over little things.
Yeah, not Jim.
Yeah.
Hubbard.
Yeah, not Jim, right.
And
yeah.
Jim was just shocked by it. But he also said he still likes L. Ron Hubbard. He still liked him.
Mm-hmm.
Jim visited me for one of his, he brought his daughter down right before he passed. Like a few months before, him and his daughter were down here. Then they went back, and then Jim passed. But he was just fabulous.
Yeah,
Okay,
I hung out
Jim.
with Jim in Hawaii with Kimmer and Michael, and then Jim came and visited, and
yes,
and then I saw him down in Tallahassee. Yeah, he was a good guy and always doing whatever he could to help people. He set up that whole forgiveness foundation to teach people how to forgive and move on.
And he loved, and his spiritual path was Course in Miracles. He used to give lectures on it and have groups, and he gave me a copy of one. And I ridge a little bit on this Christian thing, but when I read Course in Miracles now with Jim helping me understand it better, it's very good lessons. And the basic of the Course in Miracles is forgiveness, and that's how Jim came up with it.
Right.
Okay, so we're nearing the end here, but I just want to roll through some pictures here. This is on us on. Hold on here. I just had it. I messed it up. Here we go. This is us on various cruises, right, Janis and Roger?
Yeah. Was the Bahamas? This was the Bahamas.
Yeah.
Roger,
this is when Roger came over to meet us. Yeah. He met us there at the hotel.
Right at the dock.
This was at we went into some hotel to have lunch, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's father. What Peter.
I love Janis's father. He wrote very powerful books back in the 70s and lectured at different Scientology organizations about success. And I was great to connect up with him later in life because I hadn't seen him for many years.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, in this picture, it's me and my dad.
Sorry,
okay.
No, that's okay. It's you and your dad, and that's Terry next to your dad, right?
My sister Terry, and then Spanky Taylor in the middle, and then Roger, and then Vanessa Spanky's daughter, and then Peter Cook.
Yeah.
And Peter Cook just passed. We visited them in Vermont. They were hosts.
Yeah. Okay. And this is you with Peter there, right, Roger?
This is in your backyard, isn't it?
Yeah, that was my backyard.
Peter.
Yep.
Peter was maybe 90 then?
Yeah.
Well, he died at 93, so it was within that 90 to 93 time period.
Yeah, and this is pre-swimming pool. This is pre-swimming pool in Janis's backyard.
He was sharp as a whip, and he still had a fondness for the tech. And I honored that. I didn't argue with him about it or anything. It was really good.
No. This is us in Cuba. I took this photo, or somebody took this photo, but that's everybody in Cuba. You're in there with Janis and Paul and Liz Gablehouse and Maureen Bolstead and Spanky.
I have that French beret on.
Yep.
Yes.
That's me and you, Roger, on the ship on the way to Cuba. That's second time I had met you. Obviously, we'd done a cruise before. And that's me. We're in Haiti at a beach resort in Haiti.
Yeah, I remember that.
You're sitting behind me there. That's me with the towel over my head.
Great.
And then this is on that same Cuba cruise. This is like a formal photo that we took with everybody there. That included Mike Laws and Tom Provenzano, Maureen.
Was Ron Sr. in that picture?
No, he wasn't on this cruise.
On that cruise.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And I think we got one more.
No.
Here we go.
Yeah. Roger, Paul, and I when we were in Troy.
Janis and Paul came to my hometown on the Hudson River, Troy, New York, the home of Uncle Sam, and we took that picture.
Yeah. And then is there another picture of us in front of Roger's leather store?
I'm looking right now. Hold on a second.
Oh, they're
Yep.
picking. Oh,
Yeah,
there
it's
it
right
is.
here.
Oh, yeah.
It's right here.
Now that's
Yeah.
in Lenox, Massachusetts. Down the road was the Norman Rockwell Museum, where we all went to that day. And then Tanglewood, the home of the Boston Symphony in the summers. So it was a very successful shop. We would get millions of people in this little town in the summer. And I sold it many years ago, and my friend Marker worked for me. He's owned it for 25 years. It's still there. It really was fun to go there.
I'm going to tell a story about when we were there. This lady was in the store looking at suitcases, and she couldn't decide what suitcase. Roger was noticing she was having a problem deciding on a suitcase. He showed his salesmanship. He had this woman buying this suitcase for like $300 or something ridiculous. And Roger's like, oh, yeah, and it has this and it has that and so forth. And then after she pays and leaves, I said, Roger, you know this suitcase? He said, I had no idea what it did.
Well,
That's the man.
He just faked the whole thing.
I sold in that store, I sold to at least personally 50,000 people. We would get thousands of people in there, and I talked to every one of them, and it was just a joke. We could do $10,000 in an afternoon when Tanglewood was happening, but it was a seasonal business. I would only be there in the summer, but I could do it in my sleep selling that stuff. And I taught Mark how to do it, and he's had it there longer than I only was there for 10 years. He was there for 30.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, let me try and sell something here. We've got Janis's books available.
Roger,
if you guys go below the comment,
and I'm in the back of it. I say something in the back.
Yeah, but if you go down below the comment section, you can click on our store and order one of Janis's autographed books. She'll autograph it personally to you, book 1 and book 2, or either or. Okay. And then we've got some other merchandise. She's also got her yeah.
You're missing Roger's point. He wrote the review on the back of the book.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. So he's helping to sell your book too.
I highly recommend it. And I want to come back if anybody has questions and answers for me.
Yeah, Roger, we're going to get to that part. Let me do my job right now, okay?
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Anyway, we also sell Koala Calm, which is Janis's highly absorbable magnesium drink. Melts away all the stress and the worries. You can order that from our store. And let's see, what else have we got here I wanted to show? Oh, yeah. We've got coffee mugs here. Janis and I have each got our little coffee mugs. You can order them on our store, our Scientology stores, Peeling the Onion. And we have T-shirts. We have all sorts of stuff. So if you're interested, just go down below, click on our store. Christmas is coming up, and that's my sales job on that, okay? Also, we want to mention, please subscribe to our channel at Mark Fisher and Yvonne Gillham Grady. If you haven't subscribed already, you need to. I mean, there's lots of great people that we interview, like Roger, and we would appreciate it if you would subscribe, okay? And here we go, Roger. If anybody's got any questions they want to ask in the comment section, please do. I'm going to show Roger where he can check them, but also we're going to do a live question and answer video with him in the near future. So if you have any questions about anything Roger said, or you just want to ask us questions, just go ahead down in the comments section.
And don't forget to rock slam the like.
That's right. We hit those rock slams.
Mark, I think I need 3 more hours to finish my whole story.
Well, hopefully, I think everybody's going to find you very, interesting and entertaining, because you certainly are, Roger.
Interesting. It's so fun to do this. So thank you for inviting me. I really enjoy it.
Good.
No, we enjoy having you. We enjoy having you, Roger. Anyway, Roger, stick around. I'm going to end the video here, okay? But until next time, everybody, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.